Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, April 20th. I'm Gary Stevens. Once a month, we catch up with things going on at Zeeland Public Schools with one of the representatives from the district. And today we are very pleased to have the Director of Recreation for Zeeland Public Schools on the other side of our Zoom connection this morning. His name is Brett Geertsma, and Brett joins us. Good morning, Brett. Welcome back to WHTC.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
If you got a question about Zeeland Public Schools, especially in the recreation aspect, Brett will be happy to answer your call at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. Today, Brett is joining us to talk a little bit about recreation, what is offered at Zeeland Public Schools through its recreational facilities, not only for students, but for the community at large. But he also wants to share some information about in those who are living within the Zeeland Public Schools district for voting on May 3rd. It's a millage vote that'll be before voters, and it's going to be an increase. But Brett will be able to answer some of the questions about that at 616-395-1450. First of all, Brett, tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts of this particular ballot question that'll be before voters on May the 3rd.
Well, our millage started in 2002. It's a 10-year millage. So there was a 2002 and it passed. 2012 it passed. Now it's up again in 2022. We've operated under a 0.4 mil since we started in 2002. We are proposing 0.5 here on May 3, which is a 0.1 increase. That would lead to, on average, for the average Zeeland family, about an increase of about $1 per month or about $12 per year. And what that would allow us to do is to ensure that we can continue to do the capital improvement projects we'd like to do, invest back into the community, to make sure our facilities are always highest quality at all times, and to listen and meet the needs of the community for what they want from us so we can actually make those things happen.
An obvious question would be asked, why the 1.1 mil increase? Why was it necessary to raise the millage rate in this?
Well, when I was hired about 7 years ago, one of the first things I did is I did a tour of talking to between 50 and 60 people of just how are things going, what do people want from Zeeland Rec, what do they want us to improve or add. And the biggest things that I heard were that they wanted us to add to the diversity of our programming and to increase the quality of our programming. We've accomplished that and done a good job of that. We obviously still have more work to do to make things better. But we've done a good job of improving those two areas. But the biggest way that we improved those two things is by adding staff. By adding staff, that obviously adds to your expenses. And that is an area that has made our budget a little bit tighter. Obviously, an employee that operated under 0.4 and for the last 20 years, things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. Our program has grown immensely in the last 20 years. We've operated under the same 0.4 mils since we started 20 years ago. Or since the mill started 20 years ago. So because of all those changes and the added staff, our budget is tighter. Because of that, the $100,000 a year that we typically contribute towards capital improvement is being pinched a little bit. When I say a little bit, it's being pinched quite a bit. And we want to make sure that we can continue to use those funds to invest back into the community.
Talking a little bit about the capital improvement, obviously to serve the students of Zeeland Public Schools and the Zeeland community, one needs to make sure the facilities are up to date, maintenance is made, but also improvements are done. In the 20 years since the first millage came about, obviously, there are now two campuses of Zeeland High School. Actually, one campus, two major buildings. And in that western one is, of course, the natatorium, which is has an expense all of its own in that regard. But I would assume that the cost of trying to at least maintain facilities, if not improve facilities, has to be taken into account.
100%. I mean, everything, even recently in the last 2 months, 3 months, things have changed significantly. So to think that that's also true for the last 20 years is a fair thing to say. I mean, we're a nonprofit organization. We're not trying to make money. We're trying to come out even. So the last thing we want to do is ask for more money from the community. At the same time, we've heard from the community what they want from us. We've done surveys, we've used research firms, and those surveys and research firms showed us that the heavy majority of the community want us to continue to invest back into our facilities to not only maintain and continue the high quality, but to add to and improve. And to do that, because of the fact that we've also added to our staff, which have pinched our budget a little bit, we feel like it's worthwhile to bring this to a vote and let the community decide whether or not they feel like going to a 0.1 increase is worthwhile.
Brett, there would be some who would say, listen, I live in the district, yes, but I have no children in the district. My children are grown, they're not in the area. I really have no stake in the game, and trying to convince them to vote yes might be a bit of a tough sell if the Zeeland Public Schools Recreation Department was only for Zeeland Public School students. But we're talking community recreation too on this, aren't we?
Yeah, we serve on average about 22,000 people per year, about 12,000 adults, or 12,000 youth, about 10,000 adults. That ranges from 6-month-olds to 100-year-olds. And the programs that we offer about 150 programs per year in 4 different categories of aquatics, fitness, leisure, and sports. In the leisure categories, things like dance, gymnastics, art, euchre club, baking classes, and things like that. And the reason we exist, for the entire community, is we're through those 4 types of categories of aquatics, fitness, leisure, sports. The things we're trying to improve the community with is developing their skills, improving their health, helping them explore new things, and giving them opportunities just to have fun and make memories with mom, dad, grandpa, or grandma, or friends. So I totally understand. What I'm not here to do is try to convince anybody to vote a certain way. I just want to present the facts. We wouldn't even be bringing this to a vote and to a proposal of a 0.5 with a 0.1 increase if it wasn't for the research that was done by Epic MRA, a research firm who reached out to numerous community members and asked their feedback. That feedback came back positive, and with strong voter support for a 0.1 increase. And because of that survey and because of community feedback with our surveys that we've done internally as well, that's the reason we're bringing this to a vote, because the community has really led the charge and told us what they want. So we're bringing this to a ballot and allowing the entire community to vote on this, whether they use our facilities or do not. But we hope that the majority of the community understands the benefit and that we bring to the community, and all that we do to make kids' lives better, adults' lives better, seniors' lives better as well.
You mentioned about some of the non-athletic opportunities and offerings that the department has, and that sometimes gets a little bit overlooked, because when one thinks about a recreation department, one thinks about swimming and diving and running and being active, and we all need to be active. But when you talk about some of the more the cultural things that the recreation department provides, sometimes that gets shall we say, lost in the shuffle.
That's fair to say. And I think we are a department that takes pride in all we've added specifically in that category. One of the ways we invested back into the community and added to our staff, which is added to our expenses, is creating a position called our leisure coordinator position. Corey Hilt has taken that on and done a really, really good job of adding programs in that category to make sure that we are serving every kid and every adult in this community and giving them opportunities, whether they love sports or don't have any interest in sports. That ranges from things like adult dance classes, euchre club, baking classes, daddy-daughter prom, art classes. Robotics is an area that's exploding that we're really adding to. Science is an area that's exploding. We have martial arts. We have theater programs, sing-song yoga. I mean, we have things you can just go on and on for other programs that we offer. So that's an area we take pride in and are still trying to add to. And that was one of the things that I heard when I got hired on 7 years ago was, please add more so that every kid in the community has something to do and every adult in the community has something to do, whether they love sports or don't. And I think we've done a good job of that and are going to continue to try to improve that. And this 0.5 getting approved will allow us to continue to think creatively to try to serve every community member, Yeah,
the thing I'm thinking about is the fact that, yes, the overhead needs to be taken care of, the extra expenses that come with in making sure that there's staffing available. But I would think, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, that the department also relies a lot on volunteers and maybe student help as well to sort of augment the work of the staff so that the staff can be able to be efficient, but not completely wiped out because they're the only ones doing the work.
100% true, especially in our youth sports leagues. We rely heavily on volunteers. We have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers a year. For one example of that, we have a soccer program in the fall that has 1,300 kids, over 100 teams. That means we need over 100 head coaches, and typically each team has 2 assistant coaches. Just for one program, we have nearly 300 volunteers. That takes a lot of work and effort from our youth sports coordinator, Kelly Koss, to make happen. But we are blessed in Zeeland where the majority of the time we are not in panic mode to try to make that happen. A lot of moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas in this community say yes and give back to kids, and we're very blessed.
And in that regard, this is not so much for you, Brett, but maybe for our listeners as well. Sometimes the passions get a little heavy in youth sports, in high school sports, and we have seen good men and good women driven not only away from head coaching, but also from officiating as well, because we tend to put our passions that we normally have for our professional and major spectator sports into youth sports and sort of forget a little bit about the fact that these are kids that are playing. These are people who are volunteering their time to be coaches. We're not, they're not expected to be able to win and, you got to play my kid, or my kid didn't get the right call. I mean, come on, people, let's put things in perspective. This is not the NBA or the National Hockey League.
Correct. And what we're trying to do is 2 things at the same time in our youth sports, 3 things at the same time in our youth sports leagues. First, we're trying to do character development. There's a lot of life lessons you can learn through sport, through learning how to win, learning how to lose, learning how to be a great teammate, learning how to look past a poor call by an official, unselfishness, all the life skills that you learn in sports are exactly why we exist and what we're trying to accomplish. At the same time, we're trying to make sure that kids have fun and want to play next year. That's one of our second priorities. That's a cliche, but what we mean by that is we want kids to want to play next year. They'll only want to play next year if they have a really positive experience. And last but not least, we're trying to develop skills. We are trying to help East and West win championships. And we want to start that at the kindergarten level and develop those skills and teach those habits and fundamentals so that when they graduate from recreation programs and get into the middle school aspect, that they're at the highest skill level possible, and the most amount of kids possible trying out for those teams so that we can help East and West win championships.
Brett, I'm looking at the dedicated page at the Zeeland Public Schools website, which is zps.org, dealing with the millage question. And there is one aspect of it that I don't want to ask you about, and I'll explain why in a moment. There is an aspect of the title says, what would happen if this millage doesn't pass? Instead of looking on the negative side of this, Brett, I would prefer to say this millage passes. And for the next 10 years, it's a $500,000 that's going to be involved. What can the department do over the next 10 years to augment what it's doing already? In other words, what things are in the burner that can go full speed ahead once this thing passes? And looking at it, a positive spin on this instead of a negative spin there, Brett.
Well, I'd say that, our last master plan ended in 2020. Typically, when a master plan ends, we start a new one. We did not start a new master plan in 2020 because the pandemic hit. So our master plan has been paused. So what our plan is right now is whether we're operating under a 0.4 or 0.5, next fiscal year, we're going to start the process of designing a new master plan, which will involve significant community feedback. So although we have general ideas, I shouldn't say general, we have some pretty specific ideas that we've already heard from the community that we would like to use these dollars for. I want to make sure that it's clear that the community would be leading the charge on the specifics for that and deciding essentially for us how these dollars would be used. But a few examples of things that we would be able to do would be, first of all, a fitness center expansion, which would allow for more space for weights, cardio, free space, much more targeted areas. Our fitness center is a popular place and sometimes gets a little congested. That'd be a huge blessing to the community. in general, we'd be looking at some pretty significant general pool enhancements, equipment upgrades in the aquatics areas. Our pools have been here for a long time. We want to make sure they're always in tip-top shape. Pools are incredibly expensive, as everybody knows. That'd be an area that we want to invest back into as well. In the leisure category, in general, we'd be looking for equipment upgrades for all of our leisure programs. To benefit the community, we'd be looking for equipment for additional community events. We'd be looking at things. One area we're interested in diving into is potentially additional space for programming, especially for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds during the school day, where we have a little bit less access to space for ZPS facilities during the school day, because school is obviously going on, but there's a high need there. Also, early evening activities for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds would be enhanced. In the sports category, every facility that we have would be looked at and reviewed and improved and or added to as well. There'd be an outdoor basketball court repair for the courts we have at 96 and Riley Street. We'd be looking at improvements toward DeWitt Sports Complex for our adult softball fields. And in general, across the board, this would make us less pinched. And what that would allow us to do is to use creative minds to listen to the community and meet the needs of the community, because of the fact that we're not so concerned about making sure we're breaking even or making sure we're not having a deficit. And this would give us that flexibility across the board to invest and give incentives in certain areas.
Finally, to wrap things up, Brett, I just want to sort of put things back, sort of round this off into a nice big bow. On May the 3rd, voters who live in the Zeeland Public School District, and mostly in Zeeland, but also in neighboring Zeeland Township, a little bit in Holland Township, a little bit south of Zeeland as well, will be asked to vote on a millage question. What exactly is the request, and what will voters be asked to do?
The request is going to be to renew the millage with a 0.1 increase. That's going to be the request. What that would specifically lead to for Zeeland families is most Zeeland families, that would lead to a $1 to $2 per month increase in what they pay towards the recreation millage. In other words, between a $12 and $24 per year increase for the average Zeeland family. Most would be in that $20 or less, so about $1.50 or less per month increase. And that's what's going to be on the ballot. And it would allow us to do all the things that I already spoke to.
If you want more information as to exactly what this millage is about and how the department, the Recreation Department of Zeeland Public Schools, would use the funds, I will direct you to go to Zeeland Public Schools webpage at zps.org. That's Z or ZPS.org. And there's a link to Z Recreation, About Us, and Millage. We'll put a link to that particular page, as well as a link to Zeeland Public Schools webpage. We put the podcast of our conversation with Brett Geertsma on our webpage at WHTC.com in a few moments. Brett Geertsma, the Director of Recreation for Zeeland Public Schools, want to thank you very much for sharing us not only the importance of this upcoming vote, but also some of the things that the Zeeland Public Schools Recreation Department is doing for not only students of Zeeland Public Schools, but also for the community at large. Wish you and everybody in the department well, not only with the vote a week from Tuesday, but also in the upcoming years to come. Look forward to chatting with you again soon, sir.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate your time.